Welcome, everybody. Have you ever wondered what your dog can teach you about leadership? Well, our guest today did exactly that, and he's with us today. Robb Hiller has transformed his 25 years of experience with consulting and unique perspective on authentic leadership into a compelling book inspired by an unlikely mentor, his British Lab Bentley. As the CEO who assisted over 25,000 professionals and has earned the prestigious Bill Bonus Lifetime Achievement Award, Robb has discovered that a staggering 65% of people aren't working on their natural talent zones. We're going to talk all about that today. And in the meantime, I'm Danielle Hutchinson, your host and Chief Creative Officer at Office on Mission. Whether you're a business leader or searching for authentic ways to unleash your team's potential, or an aspiring author looking to transform your expertise into impact, you're in the right place. Today's episode is going to show you how to recognize and leverage your natural talents. Let's dive in. All right, well, welcome, Robb. Thank you for joining us.
Well, thanks for having me, Danielle. It's fun to be here with all of you and your listeners.
Yeah, it's always a joy to welcome new people on, and especially when especially an interesting book concept like this. I mean, I think it's great. People write business and leadership books all the time, and one thing that I haven't quite heard of is from your dog being inspired by little Bentley. Tell us a little bit about, how this came to be, and to all of our listeners out there. The book that we're referring to is Running with Joy. Yeah, so tell me a little about that. It was inspired by Bentley. What made you realize that a dog can teach such profound leadership lessons?
I guess I almost have to take it back to when I was running a high-tech company. We kept growing so fast, like go, and fight, and it was just like we doubled in size, and everything was at a fast pace. And what I found is that hiring people was a real challenge, and then quickly teaching them about leadership was also another challenge. And so that kind of led me to my strong interest in talent, because even though we had some great people in the company, they weren't necessarily the right people for that job. Doesn't mean they couldn't do another job, but I didn't know how to do that. I just knew we needed some people to work. And so once I sort of got a little bit better idea on their talent, I realized that they weren't the right people, and sometimes you didn't have another place to put them, so of course they left. And of course that caused a lot of different issues and problems for turnover. And then you have to hire someone else. It's very expensive. So my interest in talent became huge, and when we sold the company, the one thing I decided to do was learn more about leadership and more about how to put the right talent in the right job the first time. So that leads to Bentley. Bentley was our British Labrador that we brought into the family, and kind of primarily, we both love dogs, but we had at that time a son who was, let's say, around 10 or so, and he wanted a kind of a buddy around because the other two kids were gone. And so that's kind of led to, well, let's get this British Labrador and have Bentley come in. And where I began to make the connect between leadership and Bentley began to teach me that right outside the gate. So when we went to buy Bentley, we found this breeder, British Labrador, and we went to visit. It's a couple hours away. And we said, well, which dog might be good for Ryan? And they said, well, here, Megan is a black one, British Labrador. And then we have this kind of blonde type white British Labrador. Take them both and go out into this field. It's kind of like a park, and just play with them and see what Ryan likes. So we did that, and I had a little sock. And the first thing I did after we got acquainted and all that is we held on to Bentley, and then Megan was the black British Labrador. Threw that out, and Megan ran over and picked it up and then played with it. Had a ball running here and there, and then Ryan tried to call Megan back, and Megan wouldn't come. So eventually Megan came, and just dropped the sock, but then kind of ran off again. So then we corralled her up and we went over to Bentley. We did the same thing and Bentley dutifully ran right out, picked up the sock. And this is 8, 9, well, let's just say 9, 10 weeks old, very young. So they haven't been trained, and picked up the sock and brought it right back to Ryan, dropped it in his lap and laid down. And as you can imagine, that's all it took, because we saw here was someone with this special talent of not only retrieving, but the talent for love, that they would unconditionally love and follow what you ask them to do. And so that kind of began that journey of having Bentley. And I would just say what we really saw out of that, if I had to kind of grab it, the piece out of it is Bentley's natural talent just trumped everything, because you could see this dog wanted to please Ryan, wanted to please the person. And it also had the talent, skill of instantly retrieving the sock and bringing it back. But the more important thing is it wanted to be with Ryan. And so that was a real special moment, a natural talent that Bentley had.
Yeah, I mean, that's a beautiful story, first off. I mean, as a dog owner also, I know what it's like to, find that dog who, and sometimes you don't always find a dog that is already trained and knowing exactly what, you might be expecting of him. It takes a lot of time, but it's such like a joy and an amazing thing when, they right away are knowing what you're looking for. Just like that, it's a natural instinct. So I can see how that directly translates into what you'd be looking for hiring and everything that you were just talking about. So, I mean, I definitely see how your book goes in so many directions to illustrating these concepts for leadership and everything. I actually did kind of flip through the book a little bit from what I was able to access, and yeah. I noticed that you had sort of a metaphor about Bentley at the auto dealership as well. Is that a whole other story? Or is that sort of a metaphor for leadership principles? I'm kind of curious.
Say that last part again. I didn't hear it.
So was this a metaphor sort of from the start, or was this a real life story? Did you take him to an auto dealership?
Well, I've taken him everywhere. He did, and he would sit there at the dealership and walk in with me, because we would drop off my car and it would get serviced, and so I would wait. And they had a beautiful big waiting room, so Bentley would come in with me and then sit, and I don't think I even had a leash because he was so obedient. He would heel and follow me, and we would sit down in the chair, and eventually the people at the dealership got to know Bentley and love Bentley. So they would come over and play, hug him, and he would shake their hand and do all those things. And it became like whenever I would come in and they saw Bentley, he'd get a crowd around him, because they knew Bentley was coming, and they could get the energy from Bentley because he was so loving and all that. So that kind of brought out another fact, that when you are in your natural talent and you're using what God gave you, which is, in Bentley's case, to love people, he inspired them. He brought energy to a room. That becomes so easy to do when you're in your natural.
Yeah, I love that for sure. I mean, the first thing that's sticking out to me, for example, is that my dog, I could not bring him somewhere like that. He would be running around, wanting to jump on everybody. Right. Well, at least sniff them, right? No, it just goes to show the big difference there. And can you explain a little bit, how does that translate directly into sort of the leadership principles that you discussed?
Well, there's 5 key leadership principles that I have discovered, and Bentley helped me zero in on those. But the first one, of course, is to know yourself. And when you know yourself, things begin to change. Aristotle was the one who said, basically in 2 words, know thyself. And so knowing yourself went directly into what I do in my consulting practice, which is we teach people, I help people discover what their God-given talents are. And when you do know those, then you can focus more on the things that you do well and not worry about the things that you don't do so well. What I found over the course of all these 27 years of consulting now is that people tend to want to fix things that they're not that good at. And the reason they do is because people have criticized them. So then they think, if I can go fix that, then they'll like me better, and my course, correspondingly, I'll feel better about myself. It's actually not the best thing to do. So we, and I teach for all these years, is that first discover who you are, your natural God-given talents, and then number two, do more of what you already do well. Don't worry about the things that you're not good at. And that has really made a big difference in people, in their own transformation, and also, companies per se. So we have them take a series of our talent assessments, and then we get into what is it that you really do well, and how can we do more of those things in your role in the company and at home.
Yeah, no, the funny thing is, I think when I kind of looked through everything that you just said, you gave it a little bit of a spin too, right? Like a little bit of a dog metaphor. To our listeners just now, you were explaining it in very clear terms, but am I correct? In the book, you did say things like, shake off your worries, unleash your talents. I like that sort of funny wordplay there.
Right. In the book, there's pictures of Bentley. He was a beautiful, he was a beautiful dog. And when he would run into the lake and go retrieve, he would come back and bring it back and drop it by your feet. And then, of course, he would shake, and shake, like all dogs do. Well, it became very clear to me in leadership that you have to learn to forget. You have to learn to get by the inevitable things that people are going to say, do, or not understand about you. And that if you try to hold on to things, you really hurt yourself. Do what Bentley does, just shake it off. And Bentley was always happy. I mean, you could even discipline him, although he didn't need much at all. But you would say, Bentley, and he would stop. And I would say, snap my finger, and he would sit. He knew that meant sit. Well, if somehow he got distracted for a little bit when he was much younger dog, I would say, Bentley, and he would immediately stop and come sit back down, and he would forget about it. And especially if he was, running in the water, he would shake it off.
I love that. Oh my goodness. It's hard because, in real life, in practical application, with an employee or anybody else you're working with, it's not that simple for someone to just shake it off. I mean, unfortunately, we're always kind of holding things into our minds, whether it's a mistake we made or something that rubbed us the wrong way. I mean, that's a great piece of advice for anyone to hold on to.
Right. And that's found, Danielle, in that chapter 4. And the name of the chapter in general, I'll just net it out. It's called personal accountability, that we must take personal accountability for our own actions, our own emotions, for our results. But also, probably more important, is that we need to learn to pick up our own poop. And that's the name of the chapter.
Okay. I mean, it's that works. That makes sense.
Even though Bentley couldn't, he
couldn't? After
yeah,
he can do all these other things, not that.
He did all these other things, but he didn't do that. But, every time we make a mistake or we overreact, or, maybe we didn't learn to ask our teammate about something to better understand, things can go awry. And then we wonder why they don't do what we think that they should do. We have to learn to forget some of the things that maybe we did, or explain them, take personal accountability for them, and then pick up our own poop. It's okay. Okay, I made a mistake. I'm sorry. And just ask for forgiveness, and then forgive others. That's a key principle of this whole chapter, is that when you hold on to lack of forgiveness because you're mad at them, or they wronged you, or they talked behind your back, or whatever the case would be, oh my gosh, the only person that you're hurting by remembering all that is you. because you don't need to. You can ask for forgiveness because you have been forgiven for your many areas in your life, more likely than not. And all we have to do is one, ask for forgiveness and then extend that to someone else. And life is so much more fun, and it takes away the angst. Oh, I'm mad at that person. You hang on to it. And then unfortunately, the end result is you become bitter. And when you become bitter, you make poor decisions. You become more unhappy, and all it does is hurt you. So the way to let go of all that and to get back to being happy, like Bentley, is to forgive the other person. And it's simply an act of will, and it's a decision, and it does not have anything to do with their response.
Yeah, I mean, that's a hard thing these days, just that aspect of forgiveness for sure. Because like you said, at the end of the day, it's really just hurting you. That other person most likely doesn't even, care if you're forgiven or not, right? I mean, maybe they do, but what really matters is that you're able to get past that yourself.
Right.
What I'm thinking is it's very clear that throughout your life, you've developed all these different theories and, inspirational ways to help people overcome these sorts of obstacles like forgiveness and everything like that. Now, what in your life made you decide, I have all of this knowledge, I need to put it into a book? Was it specifically Bentley that inspired you with like the story of the socks that you were telling me, or did anything else did any people encourage you to write your book? I'm very curious.
Well, I would say many of my clients, after I did this for a number of years, they would say, why don't you take all this? I mean, this is great. Put it in a book because you're already teaching us, so you already have it. So why don't you do that? And so eventually, these are timeless stories, timeless truths. Why would I just hold them to all these other people I'm, teaching in companies, but have other people have access to it? So that was kind of led like, okay, you need to do a book.
Something, you can't just keep it in, you have to share it with others. I say that to people all the time. As an angel writer and an editor, if you have an idea, you can't let something hold you back. You have to share it with others. You never know how it's going to impact somebody else. I mean, just the other day, I had somebody who, it's a very unique story, actually. He was trying to write a book about helping people with hoarding problems, and you put it into that book, and you never know who's going to open it, find a sentence that you wrote, and learn something from it. And it's almost like a ripple effect, because it'll keep going and keep going. So I love that. That's just another reason why, to all of our listeners, have an idea, get out there, do what you can to put it onto paper. So that's all it is.
It helps change the world one life at a time, because hopefully people will pick it up and read, because it will help them. If they don't want that, then they're not going to read it, right? But more people in their life at certain times, one, want to be successful. And the one way to be successful is discover what your natural God-given gifts are, and then do more of them and practice them. And then number 4, why would you have to hold on to things that you don't need to hold on to? Get rid of them, shake it off, forgive others, and be a light. Because when you do that, you free up good things to come back your way, and also it takes the pressure off. So to me, they're common sense, and it's not just for business, it's for life.
Yeah, no, I mean, another very profound thing for us to think about and to consider. I was reading that you're challenging traditional ways. Like there's a section about your Xerox sales training that you were kind of counteracting a bit. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? The more specific tips like that?
Well, one of the things in Xerox was that you had to learn to ask great questions. And so if you asked great questions that were how and what and where questions, the natural response that would come from someone else would be so much easier for them to respond and for you to learn about whatever their situation was. And so even in sales, I would say almost like, especially in sales, the book Running with Joy can play a role in your life, because sales is all about discovering what problem a person might have and then helping, if you have an answer, guide them through this a process that could help them. But the only way you'll know is by asking great questions. So it's letting you be natural with that, and they're listening to understand. And if you have a solution, great. If you don't, you've made a friend. That's still great.
Yeah, I mean, see, there we go. That kind of practical end of the day. When you put, a bunch of inspirational content in there, we love it and it inspires us and wants us to do more. But then you also need those actionable things like asking the questions. And
Right.
You have a great mix of that. And another thing that I'm noticing about your book is that you don't just spit out the facts either. You're not just straight out telling people, this is what you have to do, these are the facts. Clearly you have these stories about Bentley and about learn from Xerox, for example, that not only kind of draw the reader in, get them just, you have to say, which relates to them more.
Right. One of the, I think, more profound stories or things that happened was after church one day, we were sitting out in a big deck of a restaurant. And we had brought our food out there and had another couple from church with us, and we had Bentley. And he was sitting on the deck, and he'd lay down. And there, about 10 feet away, was another round table with a family of a young, let's say 2-month-old, and a maybe 5-year-old sister. And the mom and dad were right there, and pretty soon the little boy walked over and hugged Bentley, and Bentley just loved it. And he knew how to act around little kids. He didn't do anything, he just let them be loved. Then pretty soon the 5-year-old came over, and she was fun and hugged him some more. And then she said, "Can we take Bentley for a walk around the deck?" He said, "Sure." So they raced around the deck a few times and were having fun, laughing and everything. And then they came back and brought Bentley. And then mom and dad said, "Well, we have to go, kids." So they got up from their place and started off walking away to go to the gate. And the mother all of a sudden turned around directly, walked back to us and said, "I just want you to know how much this meant to our family and our kids today. We've had a really hard week. This is the first laughing and smiles all week. And we thank you for allowing Bentley, your dog," which was Bentley, "to do that." And she had kind of like almost tears in her eyes. And we said, "Well, we're so glad that this worked out." And she walked away and she said, "Thanks so much." And she left. Just think, Bentley was who he was. We just happened to be there, but those things happen when you run with joy, because you will discover and find your purpose more that way in life than by not doing that.
I love that story. I can actually picture, if I was another customer at the restaurant, I'd be sitting at another table and just watching this happen. It's really sweet that, not only you, but, Bentley and yourself and whoever else you were with was willing to just sort of interact with people you might not have interacted with before. And it kind of goes back to what we were saying before. You never know the impact you're going to leave on someone's life,
Right.
Because now that mom's going to go home and she's happy and she has those memories that she wouldn't have had otherwise. And all
Right.
because of that little decision you made to let the kids run around with your dog.
Yep.
So it just kind of all ties together. I love it. So, another question about your book. That one specific thing you said is the book suggests that there's 65% of people who aren't working in their talent zone. Can you, sort of define that for us? And how do you recognize if someone's just not in the party, if they're not doing their best?
Well, that's a good question. First of all, today I would think it's more around 75%. It's actually gone up. The new research says that it might even be as high as 78%. But regardless, who cares about? It's a lot of people.
Yeah.
And the reason that there's not engagement in companies is because a lot of people are not in the right job. So what are they doing? They're doing things that they're not naturally good at. So it becomes more stressful. It's not, they don't really love it. They just kind of endure it. And so that's how they exist. It's also, I would say, because they haven't done the 5 principles in Running with Joy that would really, really help them. So here you have people that aren't engaged at work, that are doing and they also are the ones that kind of complain a lot. They're the ones that kind of go, oh, and they come up with reasons to leave early, not because of something important to do at home, or I got to pick up the kids, or something legitimate, but they just, I'm done, I got my time in, I can go. It's not a great way to live. I think running with purpose in your life is so much more rewarding. And when you find more of your purpose, and you use the process that we have here, it'll change your life. And that's called transformation.
That's incredible. Rob, I think that a lot of our listeners can definitely relate to that. If not for themselves, then they at least have those coworkers who, like you said, are always coming up with excuses, always complaining, like the kind of people who walk in and say like, oh, it's only Monday, like that sort of thing. Like if you're not happy with what you're doing,
right,
find a way around it. Big example for myself, I actually used to do waitressing and I did love it, right? But it took a little bit of a step to kind of transfer myself into the writing world. And I mean, look at me, I'm happier than ever. It took a lot of finding your talent zone, right? Finding that that you fit best. And that, I'm sure a lot of our listeners, if you're hearing this right now, take a moment, right? And Rob, I don't know, do you, aside from, the framework in your book, what can we tell our readers if they're finding that they're not in that talent zone? I mean, pick up your book, right? And look at the principles. That's one step.
I think most people inherently know if they're in the right job or not. They know that because of how they feel and how easy or not easy things come. So usually it's not like they're trying to figure out whether they're, in the right job or not. A lot of people just sort of like, I don't think this is quite the right spot for me or the right role for me. And I get that, because finding that magic where you know that this is a good spot for me to be in, like whether it's customer service or being a helper like you and helping people write books, to share their message and get it out there, all of those things, you kind of know, I think, in your knower. Now, what keeps you from that is usually a whole host of reasons. But if you get serious about saying, I want to find my right spot, where that natural gifting comes out, I will tell you that'll change your life. You'll go from being this person who does okay at work, and you get okay and you have some friends there, but guess what? It's not the right thing. So in the book, I think there's an exercise even in there for you to take that you can help guide you. But finding that is, I would say, really, really helpful to your long-term happiness. Because who wants to get to age 65 or whatever, I'm going to retire, and you just say, I'm counting down the days till I get out of here. Well, that would be awful. And you don't want me. Most of your people that are listening are not that. They're in a far younger age of that. So I say, make it a goal to discover that. And when you do, and then you get the courage to begin to look for that next opportunity, it will also find you, because you'll be looking in the right spot.
You're very profound message, Bob. Oh my goodness. Maybe we should our listeners a little right now, right? Stop what they're doing, pull out their notes app on their phone or a notepad and kind of just jot down their thoughts. Do you think that you're in the right zone for yourself, right? And kind of start making those steps, because you don't want to waste too much time. It's the most valuable thing we have. Why are you still going somewhere to do a job or doing anything that you're not happy with?
And I think the
Um,
other point that I would leave with you is this. Last week I was with a group of biotech type people, and they do some very important work. And there's some people that work in the lab. There are people that worked out on the floor, doing all sorts of jobs. And I looked at them and I turned to about six of them and I said, Justin, do you know that you're a leader? And he looked at me and said, no, I'm a material handling guy. I said, no, Justin, you're a leader. And then I said, Stephanie, do you know that you're a leader? And she said, really? And I said, yeah. And I said, and I held up the book, Running with Joy, and I said, Bentley right here is a leader among all leaders because leadership is not a title, it's an attitude. And anyone, if you're working in a company and you're doing things that become natural to you and you're doing them heartily, as I say, unto the Lord, you will have success. Absolute. And you'll have peace in your heart. And who doesn't want that? So leadership is not a title, it's an attitude.
That's exactly the most perfect thing to end the podcast with today. That sort of message. It's an attitude. Anybody can do it. And that kind of applies, yes. And it applies exactly to what we were saying before. You can do whatever it is that you're looking to do, whether it's writing a book, which we talked about before, whether it's, finding your right talent zone, which we talked about. If it's being a leader, whatever it is, you have the capability. It's an attitude that all ties back together. I love that. Before we actually do wrap up the conversation, there's one important question I do want to ask you, Rob. It's then, how has your life changed ever since you released your book? Can you share with everybody here, some perhaps ways that having your books on the shelf changed your career, your job?
Well, it only probably enhanced what I do from a career standpoint. It is when you have written a book and it's done well, it opens doors for sure. It does, and also it gives you a platform to talk maybe differently, because it means that you took time to put ideas down on paper. And people like, if I say one thing in a leadership workshop, that's one thing. But if I give them a book and it has questions in it, now they've got a tool to help them in their journey of life. So I think it's really important, if they have a message, they want to share it, to get it out and do it. It's definitely possible today, maybe 25 years ago it was a lot more difficult. It's opened up doors and also helped more people. I never wrote the book to make a bunch of money. I wrote it because I had a message that I wanted to share, and I felt like it was a significant enough message to help people. And so it's been crazy. As a side note, I was told that it is apparently going into China right now. And
wow, that's awesome.
It's apparently being translated into Chinese.
That's incredible.
Would have never thought.
The funniest thing that you just told me though earlier is that you said it mainly impacted your professional life. Come on, that kind of feeling inside, that's an impact in your personal life too. Knowing that your book is reaching around the world now, that's something to be proud of. Congratulations. You just found out that news?
I think about 4 months ago, so.
Okay, that's awesome.
On its way. I signed off on it, so.
That's incredible. Again, to have it reaching new audiences, that's a huge step. So, and again, to our listeners now, you never know. All that Rob had to do was start writing that book, and now people across the world are going to have copies of that in their hands. That's awesome. So yeah, I think we've kind of wrapped up our question segment of the podcast. Now, Rob, there's also one little thing I do like to do with some of my guests, and I was wondering if you'd want to do it with me. It's a little bit of a game. It's a little bit of a fun game.
Okay.
I call it the rapid fire round. So I just kind of shoot out some questions to you. They're a little bit random, kind of fun, and I'm not necessarily having to do with anything particular aside from just writing and getting to know you a little bit. Are you down to play for a few
Sure,
minutes?
you bet.
Okay. Well, one of my favorite questions to always ask is, are you an early bird writer or a night owl?
Early.
Early, okay. I
Early.
relate to that. Yeah, when I'm able to get up early, I definitely love that. I mean, don't you love the sunrise just coming up while you're typing on your computer?
Absolutely.
Great. Well, okay, next question. Music or silence when writing?
Yeah, it could go either way depending on the mood or whatever, but it seemed like most of my writing was silence. And that wasn't like I tried to, but it just seemed like when I was doing it, that's what worked. So I can't say like it was because I didn't want music. It's more that I had the silence and I don't want to give in to that. I just wanted to write.
I like that. Yeah, it kind of depends on whenever you get into your groove, whatever you're working with, just you stick with it. I think if I start and I'm listening to some music, like chill, hop on my AirPods, then I roll with it, right? But if I were to kind of start that after already working in silence, I can see how it's a little bit distracting. Yeah. Okay, one more question. Who was the first person to read your manuscript?
I had a friend who was also a nationally known, and I had him read it for the perspective of what he thought of it, because he was a speaker and he had a book out, and he gave me some, good input on it.
Okay, great. I always like asking that because you never know. Sometimes you hear something like that, like amazing input on the book, and sometimes you're just like, yeah, I passed it along to like my wife, my friends. So it's kind of funny, like who do you share it with first, right? I mean, sometimes it's one aspect or the other. Whoever it is, though, it's the first step to getting the book on the shelf. So, speaking of the book on the shelves, do you happen to have a copy of your book with you in the area right now?
I'd have to run and get it.
I was just going to say we should show our listeners a little bit about...
I don't have one right in my hand, but...
Oh, yeah. I mean, what we can do, we can always... Here. Oh, you have a little helper there.
My wife.
That's awesome. I love that support. All right, everybody, take a look. That's Running with Joy, and there's little Bentley right there on the cover.
And in the back it says, unleash your potential.
Your potential.
Activate your talents and run with joy.
I love it. You hear that, listeners? Check it out, Running with Joy. We're going to have links to it from Amazon right here on this podcast so everyone can, download their copy or order it themselves if you want a hard copy. Amazing stuff in here. And if, how can our listeners get in touch with you if they have any questions or they might want to, learn more about you?
My email is obviously wherever Amazon, I think it's got stuff on that contact, but it's Robb, R-O-B-B, at Performance Solutions, plural, M-N, Mary Nancy.com. Robb at performancesolutionsmn.com is my email.
Perfect. And we'll have that as a clickable link for all of our listeners to find too.
You bet.
Well, thank you so much for joining us on our podcast. It was a lot of fun to talk to you and learn a lot about your book and everything you have to say. And to all of our listeners, if this conversation sparked something in you today, remember your knowledge too deserves to be shared, just like Robb's. So check out our website as well, Authors on Mission. Schedule a call if you have an idea for a book that you would like to get published as well. And same here, check out Robb's website, read his book. There's so many things that we can do with our lives, as we talked about before. If you're finding yourself stuck in a place where you're not achieving your true potential, like we talked about here in the show, do something about it, right? Take that first step. Write your book, pick up Robb's book, whatever it takes. And with that, join us next time as we continue to talk to leaders just like you and help them transform their knowledge into impact. I'm Danielle Hutchinson, your host and Chief Creative Officer at Authors on Mission. This is Robb Hiller. And until next time, keep writing, keep leading, and keep inspiring. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Bye.
you.